Hello, and welcome to episode 165 on the Everyday Joy podcast. I'm your host, Joy Ravella. Quick question before we dive into today's episode. What are you worrying about? Are you worrying about your kids? Are you worrying about your finances? Are you worrying about something that wasn't a worry as of yesterday, but you've just received some news and now it's just weighing you down? Hey, if that is you, I'd encourage you to take a moment to release that for the next 10 minutes and receive what God has for you in today's episode. Because we're talking about worrying, we're also talking about letting go of worries. Let's get into today's conversation.
Don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will care for itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. That's from Matthew chapter 6, verse 34 from the New American Standard Version.
I've got Adam once again here in studio with me. Adam, so good to have you.
Thank you for having me back, Joy.
Now, yesterday we sort of got a little snapshot into who you are, and I'm really excited because in today's conversation we are going to learn more about, I think, your backstory, your origin story. Are you into gaming?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah,
sure, yeah.
I love character backstories. Oh, love reading into what makes them tick. So we're going to do a bit of that today. Today we're looking at Matthew chapter 6 verse 34. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will care for itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. What are your first impressions of this one?
This is an interesting one. My first initial impressions of this verse is that's like an easier said than done thing for me. And historically, it was like an easier said than done thing. I'm a planner, I'm a thinker, and in brackets, that means I'm also a worrier, right? I worry about everything. So initially, I definitely struggled with this verse, and it was kind of my default for a long time was the opposite of this. I would always be in the mindset of worrying all the time, and I could never actually see a way that I couldn't actually put this verse into practice. So in a sense, it's a bit ironic here, but right, like I would worry about the fact that I couldn't stop worrying, right?
I thought I was the only one.
No, you're not. So it's a super challenging verse for me. It's something that I've worked on for a long time. Yeah.
Wow. And what does this verse tell you about who God is or what He values?
Yeah. So to me, it tells me that He doesn't want me to worry. Again, He's acknowledging that worry is a thing, but it tells me that He doesn't want us to. And this verse is kind of at the end of a whole passage in the Bible that's all about anxiety. So it's some really great stuff around this verse as well. But what it tells me about God is that when I have a faith and an identity in Him, I can rest assured that He cares and He has a plan for me, and I don't need to worry about it.
And I think what you said earlier on is so key, that in this verse, God does acknowledge that worry is a thing, that it's something that we as humans experience. But when we have our identity secure in who God is and His plans for our lives, we can tackle worry differently. And I know you had an experience in your life where, I'm talking about a huge rugby tackle takedown situation emotionally. So tell me about that.
Sure. So this story goes back quite a long way. So this was when my wife and I had been married for close to 2 years, and we were expecting our daughter. So she's now 15. So it's a little while back, but it's still a story that has this kind of raw emotion, and I still feel it like when I tell the story.
Wow. And
in preparing for this, I was chatting with my wife about it, and she'd kind of like, I'd totally forgotten. Yes, I remember that.
She just blacked it out.
Yeah. So we'd been married for a little while, and we were living in this tiny little unit, and we were about to have this second baby. So me being the worry and the planner, our lease was coming up for renewal on this place. So I was really incessant about getting this sorted before the baby gets here, so I don't have to worry about where we're going to live for the next 12 months. So we'd got all that sorted, and I pushed hard, and I got a 12-month renewal, and we were happy. Great, I can tick that off the worry list, right? I don't need to worry about that anymore. And so along came Izzy. We ended up having her via C-section, so we had to spend a couple of extra days in and out of hospital. But then after 5 or 6 days, we brought her home. It was in March, and I remember it was stifling hot. And I actually went back and had a look at what the temperatures were over that week, and it was like 5 consecutive days of 40+ degrees.
Wow. You had a newborn baby.
And we had this newborn baby.
Wow.
And our little house was more of like an oven in those kind of temperatures because it was a really old house. It wasn't insulated, so it was always hotter inside than it was outside.
Yeah.
So we'd go and sit out on the porch in the evening because that's where the breeze was. So that's where we were. It must have been the second or third day that we were home. And as we were sitting out there, I just glanced across and looked at the mailbox, which was like overflowing with all this mail because we'd been in hospital and all that kind of stuff. We just hadn't bothered with the mail. Yeah. And again, we're talking back 15 years ago, right? So mail was a much bigger thing than it was today. So I ducked down to the mailbox, pulled it all out. There was the usual bills and the junk mail and all that kind of stuff. But there was this letter from our real estate agent. And so that caught my eye. And I thought, that's unusual. Like normally that letter would be like, hey, there's a rent increase or we're doing an inspection or whatever.
So did the alarm bells go off?
So the alarm bells kind of went off. I thought, no, we're going to get an inspection and we've got this new baby and the house isn't exactly beautiful right now because, brand new newborn baby. So I opened this letter quickly and had a look. And my wife kind of looked at me and was like, what's wrong? She could kind of see like the dread like just kind of pour off me. And I said, as I picked up the letter and I remember looking at her as she's standing up on the porch with this 3-day-old baby. And I said, the landlord is moving back in and we've got 4 weeks to be out. But that's only the half of it. But because we'd been in and out of hospital, that letter had come the week we'd gone into hospital.
Oh, my goodness.
So we lost another week. So it was only down to 3 weeks and we had to be out of this house with a brand new baby. So I was just like beyond words. I was like, what on earth are we going to do? So I'd put in all this work to make sure we'd had it sorted. I didn't need to worry about it. And all of a sudden, whack, it was straight back on me. And now not only did I have to get it done, but I had to get it done with a baby and get the house packed and all of those things.
And your wife's still recovering from the C-section,
Absolutely.
Which takes weeks and weeks to recover.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that was one of the most worrisome times I think in my life, in my journey so far.
Well, don't end the story there. What happened afterwards? Did you guys make it?
We did make it. We're
still here.
15 years later, we made it. But no, but it's actually like it's a critical. When I look at where we are today as a family, it was actually a critical step in our path and our journey, and we wouldn't be where we are today in a house, in a community, and a suburb that we love if we hadn't kind of been almost forced to make that move. But I think the thing that stands out to me the most is during that time, I was lucky enough to have friends and family that are well-centered in Jesus and well-centered in Christ that could actually say, don't stress. I know it's not what your plan is, but clearly God's got a plan that's bigger than yours. Right? It was through that I could then try to stop worrying and make sure that I need to rely on God because He's got a plan for it. And in the end, and a lot of people out there will resonate with the fact that the rental market right now is horrendous. It was not as bad as it is today, but back then it was still so hard to get a rental. But the fact that we stood in front of rental lines with this tiny 2-week-old baby is actually what ended up getting us the house with all this competition. So again, like there's a blessing in the worry, and there's a blessing there that God had.
Wow. There's going to be a lot of young Adams standing at the mailbox, receiving a letter. Maybe for you listening right now, you're saying, I just got an email yesterday, or I just got a phone call this morning. And chances are, if you haven't received anything like that today, there's going to come a time in your life when all your best laid plans are thrown out the window. So Adam, to that person who's just opened that letter, just opened that email, just received that phone call, what would be your encouragement to them?
So my encouragement to you would be this. There's a passage in the Bible, just a little bit earlier on than this verse, is Jesus saying, look at the birds. They fly around. They don't store up anything. They don't put anything away, but I feed them and I care for them every single day. And then he goes, how much more important are you than a bird? So if I do that for the birds, of course I'm going to do it for you. So sometimes while we can't see it, sometimes you can't feel it, and it's scary, God's got a plan for you. And sometimes that plan is to push you out of your comfort zone a little bit. It might seem scary straight away, but ultimately, when you look back, 6 months, 12 months later, when you look back, you'll go, that's actually exactly what I needed.
Matthew chapter 6, verse 34. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. I love how Adam shared a story of his best plan. It was foolproof. He had all the ducks in a row, numbered Dewey Decimal style. He couldn't have been more organized. But then life, as it often does, throws a huge curveball, and we have to adapt, we have to change our plans, and we have to trust in God. Something that I have found quite applicable that I'd love for you to try today if you are worrying is to grab a pen, grab a piece of paper, and actually physically writing it down. I know you can do it on your phone, I know you can think about it, but writing things down really helps cement it in your brain. So at the top of the page, write this: what I know to be true. Because here's the thing about worrying. We often focus on what we don't know. It's the unknown that scares us, and then we get all caught up in it. Instead, focus on what you know and write a list of all the facts, all the things you know to be true. And I'll tell you what you should write first, because this is going to frame all the other bullet points you write down underneath. Number 1, I have a God who is going to look after me. And then write the rest down. Hand it over to God in prayer. Talk to wise people around you. And don't forget Matthew chapter 6:34. Don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Well, that wraps up today's episode on the Everyday Joy podcast. Make sure you do leave a 5-star written review. And if you haven't already, join the Facebook group. The link to that is in the description below. And if you've got some specific feedback or an episode that's really impacted you, I'd love to hear it. The inbox is also in the description below. Hey, I look forward to catching up again tomorrow right here on the Everyday Joy podcast.